Sixth lecture, Revelation 9 and 10. It will be recollected that the consideration of the 8th chapter of Revelation on Thursday evening last brought under our review those terrible visitations upon the Western Roman habitable, which are associated with the names of Goths and Huns, Vandals and Visigoths and Ostrogoths, and so on. At the close of that series of judgments, represented by the first 4 trumpets, and culminating in the extinction of the Roman Empire in the West, we enter upon another phase of events, a more terrible phase, one affecting the eastern section of the empire more particularly, though in truth bearing vitally on all parts of the civilized world. It is a phase so well marked in history as to constitute an epoch, and the starting point of a new order of things in many countries. It was to Europe in a measure what the arrival of Israel under Joshua was to the Canaanites. The Roman world was about to be visited by a scourge far transcending the inroads of the northern barbarians, who at least professed the same religion, and assimilated with the populations of the countries they overthrew. Because of the appalling nature of this visitation, attention was called in a special manner to the trumpets heralding its approach. Woe! Woe! Woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels, which are yet to sound. John hears the first of these 3 trumpets. Let us imagine ourselves by his side. We hear the loud clarion blast. Then there is a pause. We wait to see the effect. First a star shoots from its place in the sky and falls upon the earth. Having landed there, it appears as a man, and receives a key with which the star-man proceeds to a certain part of the earth styled the bottomless pit, or, more properly speaking, the abyss. This he opens, and thereupon there issues from the abyss so opened columns of dense smoke, out of which come locust clouds of horse-like form, having bearded riders wearing yellow crowns and marshalled in military array, cavalry ready for the charge. John's description is as follows. And the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle. And on their heads were, as it were, crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men, and they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates, as it were breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots, of many horses running to battle. And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. Let us consider this striking symbolism seriatim. First, the star that fell from heaven. This is self-evidently a personage or power, for the star is given a key. You could not give a key to a literal star. A key being representative of opening power, the star to whom the power was given must be the man, or organization, that would have power to perform the opening. You recollect the 7 stars are declared to represent 7 angelisms, or men, sent in the midst of 7 ecclesias, or organizations of men. These were stationary stars in the hand of Christ, because the spiritually endowed men, sent and sustained by him, peacefully ruled in the midst of the ecclesias. But here is a star descending to the earth, symbolizing a very different function. Such a star under the 3rd trumpet symbolized the destructive descent of Attila from the country where he ruled upon the Roman earth, as will be recollected. What is meant by the key-using star of the 4th trumpet? We discover the answer in the contemplation of what he did. He opened a pit, not a bottomless pit, for there could not be such a thing as a pit without a bottom, but an abyss, a deep place of the earth, whence there emerged upon the countries of the Roman habitable swarms of yellow-crowned or turbaned cavalry. This at once fixes our attention upon the Arabian Peninsula, where at this very time Mahomet appeared, and whence the Saracenic hordes poured forth under his inspiration to offer the affrighted nations of Europe the Koran or the sword. That this region should be termed the abyss is not inappropriate in view of the topographical configuration of the Holy Land, which is its door of egress in the direction of Europe. You will perceive by a glance at the map that the Holy Land, at the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea, lies between Europe and the Arabian Peninsula. Now there is a peculiarity about that part of the surface of the earth which is not to be met with anywhere else. You may have seen it noticed in the recent lecture by Canon Tristan, an extract from which appeared in the Christadelphian a month or 2 ago. The country gradually slopes on the east and north towards the basin of the Dead Sea, with the result of forming a huge depression which may well be described as an abyss. The Jordan descends along the centre course of its bed from its source in Lebanon until it empties itself into the waters of the Dead Sea. And the hill country, after leaving Jerusalem to the eastward, goes down quite precipitously in the same direction. The depth of the geographical hollow thus formed may be estimated from the fact that the water of the Dead Sea is 1,300 feet below the level of the Mediterranean. The mountains enclose it on the eastern side, and complete a depression which presents the idea of an immense valley without an exit. For the mountains at the lower end of the Dead Sea close it on the south. In this valley, the valley of the Jordan, the climate is of a tropical heat in certain parts. In fact, all the climes are to be found in it, from the temperate atmosphere of the upper regions to the oppressive heat of the lower valleys. The vegetation gradually changes as the land rises from one point to the other, corresponding to the climatic conditions. The products of the whole earth and every order of landscape beauty are to be found gathered into this remarkable depression or abyss. The abyss was the door through which the Mahometan myriads passed from Arabia to Europe. Consequently, it was appropriate to take it as representing the whole region to which they belonged, of which it formed a part. We have simply to ask if the history of the case corresponds with the symbolical opening of the abyss which John witnessed, and the issue of locust clouds which ensued? The answer of history is very clear and distinct. The preparation of the abyss for the opening was going on during the closing events of the fourth trumpet. A preparation was needed, for prior to this, the Arabian Peninsula was divided up into a large number of petty principalities whose separateness and independence were incompatible with the unity necessary to form the Arabians into a moving cloud of locusts. It was needful to fuse them into one power. This was done by the wars that ensued among them upon the publication of Mahomet's pretensions. These pretensions were at first very obscure and feebly put forth. A dreaming visionary, unlike the prophets of God in every particular, whose writings in the so-called Koran are the manifest effusions of a weak, egotistic, and fanatical mind, biased with a desire to imitate the Scriptures, whose characters he frequently refers to and endorses. At last gave himself out as a prophet having a divine mission. His pretense was correct in a certain sense, though by no means sent from God as the prophets of Israel were. He had a work to do, and a place in the programme. He was to organize a terrible scourge for the papal idolaters of Europe. This was the work providentially assigned to him. He was a servant of God, as Nebuchadnezzar was, a servant without knowing or being known of God. His special work probably required his special idiosyncrasy. As a result of his craze, he secreted himself for a time in a cave and pretended to receive divine revelations. These revelations are published in his books. They're terrible trash, as anybody taking the trouble to read the Koran will find. He laboured for 3 years, and by the end of that time had made 14 converts, family relatives. At last he succeeded in attracting around him quite a number of adherents. The attempt of their townsmen at Mecca to put them down, at first resulting in the flight of Muhammad to Medina, led to strife in which Muhammad and his friends made free and successful use of the sword. Success enlarged their ideas and led to demands of allegiance on the surrounding tribes. The resisted demands led to further war, and war working favourably on his side, Muhammad attained a position of power and importance until finally the whole of the Arabian nation were subdued to his pretensions and lent themselves to his ideas. During these events we contemplate the abyss in a state of preparation for the emission of the locusts. Without it no amount of opening of the Alps would have sufficed for the providential work to be performed. It wanted the fire and the smoke, and these were generated by the internal dissensions of the Arabians, which elevated Muhammad from the position of a private member of a tribe to a leader of a nation, and prepared the whole Arabian people for that wonderful onslaught on the Roman Empire, which is renowned in history as the Wars of the Saracens. The pit being ready for an opening, the occasion for the use of the key duly arose. The Roman Emperor Heraclius, on the way from Persia homewards, having heard of the Arabian turmoils and the upshot of them in the elevation of Muhammad, sent to salute Muhammad, as one sovereign does another. Muhammad, who considered the Catholics idolaters, sent back a message demanding Heraclius to give up the worship of idols and become a worshipper of the true God. Muhammad's messengers, by whom this message was sent, were assassinated. Whether by Heraclius' orders or against his will is not known. The effect on Muhammad was the same as if it had been a deliberate act. He resolved on the invasion of the Roman Empire. With this object he set his army in motion towards Palestine, at that time subject to Rome, and forming the political abyss, symbolized by the geographical, out of which the locusts were to issue. Why were the armies of Muhammad symbolized by locusts? This seems to be answered by two facts. First, Arabia is the native country of locusts, armies issuing from which are fitly represented in symbol as clouds of locusts. Secondly, the Hebrew word for locust is the same as that for Arab as it regards its radical elements, locust being Arbe and Arab Abi. It's a third fact that in some parts of Arabian literature the locust is introduced as the heraldic symbol of the Saracens. It is a fourth fact, not very strong to be sure, but pointing in the same direction, that Mohammedans say that in the course of his revelations, locusts dropped into the hands of Muhammad, bearing an inscription on their wings describing them as the army of the great God. Palestine, in its eastern borders, fell before the sword of Muhammad, and he died while contemplating further military measures. His death, however, instead of stopping, accelerated the opening of the abyss. His relative, Abu Bakr, took the command as his successor, and entered with great ardour on the work that had been begun by Muhammad. His army was principally composed of cavalry. Cavalry was not merely an arm of his force, as in the case of the Romans, but cavalry was the army. The result was to give his movements a celerity that baffled Roman calculations. An immense body of horse flew from point to point, and carried all before them like a cloud of locusts. Their devastations, however, were not general and indiscriminate, but confined to certain objects. You will observe verse 4. It was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. It is interesting to note the feature in the Mohammedan enterprise corresponding to this command. The command was a providential command, of course. That is, a commission providentially assigned, and not a command oral and express according to the ordinary meaning of the term. We learn this sense of the word command when God employs it. From even the unsymbolical part of the Scriptures, such as where God said to Elijah, when instructing him to move to Zarephath, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. A widow woman who knew nothing about the matter when Elijah arrived. See Ways of Providence. The command of God to the Mohammedan locusts to confine their depredations within a certain channel, though not direct and express, was well marked in the form it took in the natural course. An address issued to the Saracen troops after Muhammad's death by Abu Bakr, Muhammad's successor, intimating his purpose to prosecute the war against the Romans, whom he styled the infidel, contained the following passage: Let not your victory be stained with the blood of women or children. Destroy no palm trees, nor burn any fields of corn. Cut down no fruit trees, nor do any mischief to cattle. You will find another sort of people that belong to the synagogue of Satan, who have shaven crowns. Be sure you cleave their skulls and give them no quarter till they either turn Mohammedans or pay tribute. This was the historic illustration of the command recorded centuries before in the pages of the Apocalypse, of which, of course, Abu Bakr was ignorant. The enmity of the Mohammedan squadrons was officially directed against the supporters of Roman Catholicism. Their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. So we read in verse 5. In verse 3 there is an earlier allusion to the same point. Unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. Scorpions strike with their stings with tormenting and sometimes with fatal effects. But the scorpion power in this case was not to be unto death, verse 5. To them it was given that they should not kill them, but they should be tormented 5 months. What was the scorpion power possessed by the Saracens? We find an answer in the fact that they employed in their military operations formidable missiles which they styled scorpions. These missiles were of a chemical mixture which was the forerunner of gunpowder. An Arab writer thus speaks of them in 1249. The scorpions, surrounded and ignited by nitrated powder, glide along like serpents with a humming noise, and when exploded they blaze brightly and burn. Now to behold the matter expelled was as a cloud extended through the air, which gave forth a dreadful crash like thunder, vomiting fire on every side, and breaking down, burning, and reducing all things to ashes. Armed with this power known as Saracen fire, and afterwards as Greek fire, because finally adopted by the Greeks, the Saracens had power to injure with scorpion power. But their mission did not extend beyond the infliction of torment. They were not to kill the Eastern Roman Empire in the way the Western had been killed by the Goths. They were only to injure. The men of the Eastern or Greek third of the Roman Empire were to retain political life in the midst of their torment, but against the will of the majority. The bulk of the people were desirous for the sake of peace to submit to political death and accept the Saracen yoke. But death fled from them, because it was not in the divine purpose that the locust should kill in the symbolic sense of the term, but only injure 5 months twice over. See verses 5 and 10. Why not 10 months instead of twice 5? Because locusts only appear in 5 months of the year, and it would not have been in harmony with the natural history of the symbol to express it in any other way. But they could not be literal months as applied to the events of the symbol. 10 months are not 1 year, and the afflicting career of the Saracens in European countries extended over 300 years. The explanation is found in the fact with which all present are more or less acquainted, that literal days in symbolic use stand for years. To the Saracens, then, was assigned the mission of harassing and afflicting the countries of the Catholic apostasy for the long period of 3 centuries, but not to prevail to the extinction of its political independence. Let anyone read the history of the Saracens from the appearance of the aggressive Mahometanism in AD 632, and he will recognize the features of this hieroglyph in their historical exemplification. They had a king over them. This is not the star of verse 1, which opened the pit, but is rather to be taken as the official or head under which the Saracenic locusts were organized after their issue from the pit. The historic parallel is found in the caliphs of the Mahometan system. The caliph was styled the commander of the faithful. In the papal system you have the pope. In the Mahometan, the caliph. The caliph was a destroyer. This was his providential function. His name is expressed in Greek and Hebrew, see verse 11, denoting that his destroying operations were principally to bear on the Hebrew and Greek areas of the Roman Empire, which historically was the case. The following paraphrase by Dr. Thomas of the first 12 verses of the chapter presents the interpretation in a striking and obvious form. 1. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw one who had acquired power and become a king, precipitate the forces of his kingdom upon the territory of the Eastern Roman Empire. And to this king was yielded the power of Arabia. 2. And he removed the barriers by which Arabia was shut up from the world without. And a fiery host issued forth, and by reason of the smoking fierceness of their wrath, subverted the imperial Byzantine authority, and changed the political aerial constitution of the Catholic countries they overran. 3. The wrathful hosts that invaded the Eastern Roman Empire were Arabians like locusts for multitude, and they had power fatal as the power of scorpions. 4. And if was commanded them by one, styled the commander of the faithful, that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only those men who have not the truth of the deity in their understandings. 5. And to the Arabians it was given that they should not extinguish the sovereignty of these men, but that they should be tormented in war during 150 years with a scorpion-like torment. 6. And in those days shall these ignorant professors of Christianity seek political extinction, and shall not find it, and shall earnestly desire to be a conquered people, and political death by conquest shall flee from them. 7. And the resemblances of these Arabians, when embattled, exhibit them as cavalry prepared for war. And on their heads they wore yellow turbans, and their faces were bearded, and they had long flowing hair like the tresses of women, and their spirit was ferocious as lions. 9. They had on polished steel cuirasses, and the sound of the right and left wings of their armies was of multitudes of cavalry rushing into battle. 10. And they trailed in their rear, or tails of their host, scorpion artillery for destruction, and their power to hurt the rest of men westward was also 150 years. And they had over them a king styled a caliph, the messenger of destruction among the subjects of the Eastern Roman Empire, or the Abyss. In the land of the Hebrew he earned the name Abaddon, or Destroyer, and in the land of the Greek that of Apollyon, which signifies the same. 12. One woe, that of the fifth trumpet, is passed away after 300 years. Behold, there come 2 woes more before the consummation, the 6th and 7th trumpets after these things. One woe is past. It was a long one, and of a nature fully to justify the awful imagery in which it was symbolically foreshadowed. 2 more woes come hereafter. With the first of these 2, we will now concern ourselves for a short time, viz.,